I thought I would start out by just telling you, I alluded to this book last night. This is the commentary that Dr. Hamilton has his students read. I certainly don't have a wide collection of Ecclesiastes commentary, so I don't know whether this is the best or not. Greg, you can chime in if you want, but it's a good one. You can see, pardon me, it's by Derek Kidner, Kidner. You can see it's not too thick. It's easy reading, but it's not shallow. It's got a lot of really good stuff in it. So anyway, that's the one in that course, in that video course. I don't know if you've gone there or not, but you'll see at the bottom he assigns pages out of this. So this is the commentary that he uses.
I don't think for the benefit of the crowd, that series, Bible Speaks Today, wonderful series. Everything in that series, that's the name of the series there on the bottom.
Yeah, well, the Bible Speaks Today.
Yeah, okay. So that series, all paperback like that, so all the commentaries are relatively inexpensive. They're not $50. But you're studying a book, that's the series you want right there. The Bible Speaks Today. Most of the commentaries don't look like that. That's the newfangled cover right there. Mm-hmm. So if you end up with a cover that doesn't look like that, it's still the same thing. They just keep publishing new covers because, you know, it's kind of like cars. They have to keep adding new chrome. So that's all that is. But Derek Kidner, Kidner, is a very conservative, very good guide. He's written a commentary on almost every book in the Old Testament. Anything Kidner writes is good. You can trust him.
This is not a new commentary. I think it looks like this one is from 1976, but really good. If you're listening to the videos and you got to the third one, you'll notice that it's shorter than the rest. And so what I really want to encourage you to do is I hope we can have a lot of participation tonight, because there's a lot of wisdom in this room. And I think it's an opportunity for us to share with each other. Based on what we've done so far, if you had to give not a 3-minute but a 15-second summary of Ecclesiastes, what would you say? Okay. Anybody else? You know, how about eat, drink, and enjoy your toil? I haven't counted. I don't know how many times it shows up, but it shows up over and over and over again. And it turns out, if you listen to that video, you'll know that Dr. Hamilton tells us that Ecclesiastes is divided into two basically halves. And the second half begins in chapter 6, about verse 9 or 10, something like that. And if you go to chapter 6, verse 12, you'll see two questions, and we're going to deal with one of those questions tonight, and then the second question will combine with some other stuff to kind of wrap it up tomorrow night. But the first of the questions in chapter 6, verse 12 is, "For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow?" In the second half, that question is answered. You'll see that the next question there is, "For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun?" That question is also answered in the second half, and we'll get to that tomorrow. But that first question, "Who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow," is answered in verse 15. And you will not be surprised to find that it says, "And I commend joy, for man has nothing better under the sun but to eat and drink and be joyful. For this will go with him in his toil through the days of his life that God has given him under the sun." Chapter 8. That was 8:15. So once again, even in the second half of the book, just like the first half of the book, what we've seen almost from the beginning is that that's kind of the refrain that Ecclesiastes, or that the preacher says over and over and over again. And so what Dr. Hamilton did, and I just thought it was really good, and so we're going to just kind of follow exactly the path that he followed, was to go back, look at chapter 5 and look at chapter 6, just a little bit of that, because it gives us a little more insight, I think, into this. So go back to chapter 5, and let's look at verse 18. Behold, what I have seen to be good and fitting is to eat and drink and find enjoyment. There it is again. In all the toil with which one toils under the sun, the few days of his life that God has given him, for this is his lot. Everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them, and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil, this is the gift of God. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. So that's kind of saying the same thing, but it adds a little bit more, right? And in fact, if you look at that passage, it looks like there are some people that may toil a little bit more than others, and there may be some who have more wealth and possessions than others. And of course, life bears that out. Okay? So we got a couple different people here, maybe, with maybe a little bit more focus on work in one case and a little bit more focus on wealth and possessions in the other case. But it turns out for both of them, it says that this is his lot. That's true for the first person where it's talking about toil, and it's also true for the second person who is given wealth and possessions. The other thing that's really interesting here is that for this is his lot, as it says in both cases, is, according to Dr. Hamilton, that means it's his heritage. That's what's intended for him. That's what God intends for that man or that woman. But you'll also notice there that it says, everyone also to whom God has given wealth and possessions and power to enjoy them and to accept his lot and rejoice in his toil. You see a phrase that we haven't really encountered yet, and that's the power to enjoy them. So it kind of looks like there are two gifts here, right? One gift is maybe the wealth and possession, maybe the job, but the second gift is the power to enjoy them. So, and it's also really interesting. I love verse 20. It says, for he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. So there are a couple of places in Ecclesiastes where you get this description of a person and you say, that's kind of the person I want to be. So this is what Derek Kidner says about this person. If I can find it here. He says, life does not pass swiftly for this person because it is meaningless, but because by the grace of God he finds it utterly absorbing. I just love that. Utterly absorbing. I tried to think of some more words, and a word that Harriet and I have talked about recently is enchanted. It's almost like this is a person that's enchanted with life. Somebody who really has got it under control. Somebody who really understands what life is all about. We talked yesterday about the fact that the Puritans talk about a rule of life. Sounds like this is somebody who's got it figured out. Life is utterly absorbing for this person because they see the gift of God. They have the power to use that gift, and they appreciate that. So I thought we're going to go to 6 in just a second, but as part of kind of participating here, I wanted us to think for just a little bit about what that person really looks like. And sometimes maybe to figure out what somebody looks like is to think about what a person looks like that doesn't appreciate the gift that God has given them. That doesn't live a life that's utterly absorbing. Maybe the other end of the spectrum. Sometimes you can learn a lot just by comparing one person to another, or to compare the ideal to ideal. So what does a person look like that doesn't live life this way?
The little paragraph before that describes a man, and it ends at this: says, moreover, all his days he eats in darkness and much vexation and sickness and anger. So he's not
in a good place. He's not an enchanted person. He's utterly absorbed, but it's not in a good way, right? I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't even go back and look at that. Moreover, all his days he eats in darkness, in much vexation and sickness and anger. What else would that person look like? Discontent. Bitter.
Happy with, there's nothing positive.
Yeah.
Grumbling, complaining. Yeah.
Grumbling, complaining. These are all words that I wrote down too. Well, not all of them, but I have always complaining, always angry, always seeing what they perceive as the unfair things in life. They got an ongoing list, an ongoing mental list of all the problems that they've got, all the things that are bad, all the wrongs that have been done to them. They never forget them. Because basically what's happened is they're not eating and drinking and finding enjoyment in their toil. They're spending all their other time doing this. I hate to say that it's a glass half empty kind of person, because that's the way Harriet describes me. In our house, she's the glass half full and I'm the glass half empty. But the truth be told, that's true. I mean, sometimes that's maybe an apt description of that person as well. So it's interesting here, because what comes next is a contrast. If you look at chapter 6, let's go to chapter 6. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. So let's stop right there for just a second. This is a person that seems to have everything. They've got wealth and possessions. They've got wealth and possessions just like the person back there in chapter 5. But there seems to be a big difference in this case. In this case, it says God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place. So you got a contrast here. In this case, this is somebody who's got wealth and possession, but for whatever reason, God hasn't given them the power to enjoy that. So that person's not really in a good place. So I think one thing to do here is to recognize, when you look at those two things, that, and this was really insightful to me, to think about the fact that God has blessed me in so many ways, but he's also blessed me with the ability and the power to enjoy those blessings. It's like there are two gifts wrapped up in one. It's not just the blessing, but it's the the ability to enjoy the blessings. In fact, there are a lot of people probably that if you just had to, have a ledger here and compare maybe what they have to what I have, or what they have to what you have. Maybe if you were counting blessings, they might have more. But if they don't have the power to enjoy them, if they don't enjoy them, then they're in a bad place. So part of what Dr. Hamilton emphasizes here is the necessity of not only thanking God for the blessings, but also thanking God for the power or the ability to enjoy those blessings. And so one of the questions that comes up is, how do you appreciate the gift and the giver? How do you value the gift without devaluing the giver? I think of Christmas morning. We've all seen little kids who open up a gift and they love the gift. They never say thank you or anything like that. In fact, they may not even know who it came from. So they may value the gift, but not the giver. So let's talk about that for just a little bit. How is it here that we ought to really be thankful to God, not only for the gift, but for the ability to enjoy the gift that he's given us?
said, recognize it as a separate gift. And it's a relationship thing, because I think you pointed out too that, you know, God wants us to enjoy the gifts that he gives us, you know.
Well, we certainly shouldn't take it for granted, right? Because if you look at chapter 6, it says that that may not always be the case. For whatever reason, we may not always have the power to appreciate that. Maybe something happens. I don't know exactly what he's talking about here when he says he's not giving him the power to enjoy them, but you can imagine a lot of things that might happen in somebody's life that may rob them of the ability to enjoy certain blessings.
That word used earlier in one of the passages, the vexation, that, you know, we could have so much, and yet we're so in that midst of being just vexed constantly about those things, to get more, to keep, or to maintain, and we just kind of fall back into the inability to just be blessed in where we are.
Yeah. Well, think about the person who seeks wisdom. You know, and they gain wisdom, and they gain wisdom, and they gain wisdom, and they gain wisdom, and basically the description of that person is that it's vexation. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing. Yeah.
What about maybe not having your life be so crowded with so many things or what activities, so that we have the time to be thoughtful and to thank him and appreciate his gifts?
Yeah. I have shared with our Sunday school class before, there was a little pamphlet that came out, I don't know, it may have been the 70s, called The Tyranny of the Urgent. Has anybody else ever seen that? It's called The Tyranny of the Urgent. It's a little pamphlet. It's about this big, and basically what it says is you can be so busy, so wrapped up with things that you consider to be urgent that it causes so much angst and so much problem in your life that you can't really get anything done, that everything seems to be urgent. You know, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, and I got to do it now, that sort of thing. So I think that's right. I mean, are we too busy sometimes to thank God for the blessings that he's given us? When I first started teaching Sunday school years ago, we had a Sunday school director, and he did this all the time. He would say, I want everybody to look at their watch. And he would say, I'm going to give you 60 seconds, just total quiet here. And if there's total quiet, 60 seconds is a long time. And he would say, there's nobody in this room that doesn't have at least 60 seconds to thank God. Nobody. It's just 60 seconds, but you can accomplish a lot in 60 seconds. That's always stood out to me, that we just got to take the time to do it. What's probably the primary way, and this is, I think, the argument that Dr. Hamilton would make, that we devalue the gift or the giver? What's probably one of the worst insults that somebody could show you? Yeah, well, I was thinking of ignoring. You know, if somebody turns their back on you, if somebody ignores you, if somebody pretends that you're not there, that's a real insult. That bothers everybody. But Dr. Hamilton's point was that's exactly what we do sometimes, that God gives us all these blessings. Not only does he give us all these blessings, but he gives us the power to appreciate and enjoy these blessings, and then we just ignore the blessing, or we ignore the giver of the blessing. We ignore the one who's given the blessing, and we ignore the one who has given us the power to enjoy the blessing. Of course, the other way that you can devalue the gift is to abuse the gift, to use the gift in the wrong way. Anything else? How else can we devalue the gift or the giver?
Prideful in like we think we did it and it wasn't a gift from God.
Yeah.
We take credit for it.
Yeah.
I did this or I did that.
Yeah.
I think we inherently overlook a lot more that he gives to us. That, you know, there's a lot of it that we take for granted. I just took a breath and he gave that. He's just and he's righteous, and you know, compared to his standard, really ought to there ought to just be a smoking spot here left where he just, got rid of it.
Yeah.
And get his grace and his mercy. And so even before you start talking about your food and your drink, when we start looking from that perspective, I think it also shifts the way we think about
Yeah.
what we can enjoy.
James says he's the giver of all good things. I mean, what does that not include? So I think one thing is, to take it for granted. I'm going to share a quick little story here at the risk of embarrassing Harriet, but a few years ago I said that when I was a kid I had this quilt on my bed that I just really liked. And if you don't know this about me, but I cannot stand to be cold. I much prefer hot weather. And so I had this quilt, and Christmas rolls around, and it was a certain style of quilt. And she quilts. So Christmas rolled around, and totally unbeknownst to me, I don't know how she pulled this off, but she did. She made me one of those quilts. It's not a bed-size quilt, but it's the kind that you can sit on the couch and cover up with. What would it be like if I sold that quilt in a yard sale? I probably wouldn't be standing here. I'd be more than cold. We have a joke, that quilt's going in my coffin, because I'm getting a quilt in my coffin, she's getting a ceiling fan. What would it be like if I took that quilt and just put it in the closet and never pulled it out? You know where that quilt is? It's on our couch. Even if it's July and it's 95 degrees outside. And that quilt's going nowhere. And the kids may argue over whether or not they're going to get the quilt, which one of them is going to get the quilt, and I say it's a moot point because by the time I'm dead, that quilt will be worn out. So not only does the quilt not go in the closet, not only is the quilt not going in a yard sale, the quilt gets used. And I just thought about that when I was thinking about the blessings that God gives us. Does God give us blessings and we stick them in the closet? Or does God give us blessings and we put them in a yard sale? We don't appreciate them. We just get rid of them.
You know what's involved in that, and the planning and the care and the commitment to finish it. I think that's a great analogy of the gifts that God, crafts for each of us.
Yeah. And here's the other thing that Dr. Hamilton said, and I thought this was just an absolutely great point, is that when God gives us a gift, and this is where the quilt analogy works, we ought to feel the love. I can tell you, if I gave you that quilt, you might use that quilt and appreciate it, but you are never going to use that quilt and appreciate it to the extent that I will. It means more to me than it would mean to anybody else in here because of who made it, because I know that it was an act of love and a sacrifice of time. And then what we do, Dr. Hamilton says when he's talking about that, is we not only feel the love from God, but we turn around then and give that love back to God as a result of the blessings that he has given us and the power that he has given us to enjoy those blessings. I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to be totally transparent here. Sometimes I'm just terrible at this. I'm just terrible. We've got the tyranny of the urgent. There's so much to do that's got to be done now that I just sometimes don't take the time to enjoy what God has given me and to thank him for what he's given me, to value it. So I think it's really easy for us to not appreciate the blessing and to not appreciate the giver. But again, think of the description of the person who does this. Think of the description of the person here who values the gift and who values the giver. He will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. What a great description. Let's think a little bit more about in 6:3, it says, if a man fathers, we've already read this, but let's go back and look at it. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, then it goes on to talk about the fact that he's, a stillborn child is better. So what's he alluding to here when he talks about many children and a long life? I'll tell you what Kidner says about that. Kidner says that these are the things that people in the Old Testament dreamed of. This is what they wanted. They wanted long life and lots of children. And so the point here is, if you go down a little bit further, it says, even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good. So even if you get those things, even if you get the things that you dream of, but you don't enjoy the blessings that God has given you, then this is the description of you. So again, let's think for just a second. We don't necessarily, in our culture today, that's not what we would say we dream of, right? We wouldn't say we necessarily dream of huge families and super long lives. Not that those things aren't valued. They're great. But what in our culture might we substitute for that? What in our culture are the things that we dream of that we might put in place of the things or the blessings that God has actually given us?
Ton of money, big house, nice car.
The American dream. Yeah. Notoriety. It also seems, if you look at our culture today, that one of the things that our culture as a whole really values is their freedom and their autonomy. I want to do what I want to do, and I don't want anybody to tell me that I can't do it. That seems to be what a lot of people dream of. Maybe that's a big house. Maybe it's being somebody that you're not. It's whatever. So I think the point here is, once again, you can have all these blessings, is what he's saying there. You can have all this stuff, but if you don't really enjoy the blessings that God has given you, the legitimate blessings that God is giving you, not the things that you've gotten because you've worked really hard for, then you're not going to be like the person described up there in chapter 5. For he will not much remember the days of his life because God keeps him occupied with a joy in his heart. You'll be, as we read in verse 17, like the person who eats in darkness in much vexation and sickness and anger. So I think the point here is to recognize that we have a God who gives us blessings, and he gives us the power to appreciate those blessings. And Ecclesiastes tells us over and over and over again that that's what we really ought to pay attention to. All this other stuff, the American dream, the fancy car, the notoriety, the advancement in our career, is never going to satisfy. That's what we hear over and over and over. And as we said last week, that's not the message we get from society, right? That's not what society is going to tell us. And so if we spend too much time listening to society, we're going to get our philosophy and theology all wrong. Now, one of the things that, in the amount of time that we have left, that Dr. Hamilton pointed out, and I did not realize until this, how many times that phrase, like eat, drink, and be merry, or eat, drink, is in the Bible. It's in the Bible more than I realized. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 32, Paul says, "What do I gain if, humanly speaking, I fought with beasts at Ephesus? If the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die." Now hold on to that, and let's go to Luke chapter 12. verse 16. Jesus tells a parable. The land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, "What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops." And he said, "I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "Fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." These contrasts are really helpful, I think. You got three different people here who are thinking about eating and drinking, or eating and drinking and being merry. So what's the first one? The person in Ecclesiastes eats and drinks and enjoys the toil of his labor. For what reason? Because he realizes it's a gift from God. What is a guy in 1 Corinthians doing? If there is no resurrection, life is hopeless. That's a hopeless person. Maybe they're eating and drinking and being merry, but they're eating and drinking and being merry because the resurrection means nothing to them. And what about the guy, the rich landowner in Luke chapter 12? He's eating and drinking and being merry because he appreciates the gifts that God gave him? No. Why? Nothing is more important to this guy than wealth and possessions. So there are a lot of people that eat and drink and are merry. But I think what the book of Ecclesiastes, at least, when it comes to that particular phrase, it's encouraging us to do that, but it's to do it for the right reason. I think of somebody that I used to work with, and I would think of them as somebody that they ate, they drunk. You can take that in more ways than one. But they did it for the totally wrong reason. This was a person who had no belief in God. The resurrection meant absolutely nothing to them. They were a wealthy person. They had inherited a lot of money. Their father was a tobacco salesperson in Turkey. This person grew up in Turkey. She had gobs of money. She was single, and she spent it. She had a great amount of fun, and that's the way she lived her life. So she was eating and drinking and being merry, but it was for the wrong reason. I just imagine two families out having a picnic on a Saturday afternoon, and seeing one of them that's eating and having fun and have a lot of fun with their kids, enjoying the outdoors, eating and drinking, barbecuing and all. They're doing it, and the whole time they're doing it, they're looking at creation and thanking God for creation. They're thanking God for the fact that He gave them the money to have this picnic. They're thanking God for the fact that they've got the health to be able to do it. They're thinking about all these blessings, and you want to be there. I want to be with that family. You may have another family over here who's doing the same thing, but they're doing it for the totally wrong reason. No appreciation for God, no appreciation for what He's given them, no appreciation for the power that He's given them to appreciate what they have. They're doing it for all the wrong reasons. So I think what Ecclesiastes has challenged me to do in this section is to really think about, of these three people here who, so my job is to not only eat, drink, and be merry, but it's to eat, drink, and be merry for the right reason, with the right mindset. Because if I do that, then I'm going to be the guy that's described here in chapter 5. And that's the kind of person I want to be. That's the kind of person I want us to be. So we got about 7 minutes or so. That's all I've got for tonight. But I'll just open the floor up for comments.
If I might offer, yesterday and today, this kind of is my reflection on it. You asked for that earlier. The phrase "under the sun" happens so many times here, right? It's probably one of the most used phrases in Ecclesiastes. So I would summarize it this way in my own understanding. is that this is a book about the people who live under the sun, telling them not to ignore the one who is beyond the sun. And I think about that all the time, that God lives above me, is doing things beyond me, etc. I get a little splinter of reality or splinter of eternity, and I get to live in that splinter with regard to what's beyond the sun. So I live under the sun without ignoring what's beyond the sun, or the one who is beyond the sun. And I think that's the way I summarize what you just said.
Yeah.
That amongst those three categories of eat, drink, and enjoy your toil, be merry, that's the guy. That's the guy I want to be.
Yeah. I think that phrase, I think I read somewhere that phrase under the sun is in the book of Ecclesiastes about 30 times. And that'll come up more tomorrow. But this is the person who is living under the sun with an appreciation for the fact that there is a God, that there are things going on. And what we'll see tomorrow just is that he's aware of what's going on. He knows what's going on. He causes what's going on. And there is tremendous comfort in that, no matter what's going on.
Sometimes the criticism is made of people. Somebody will say something like, well, they're so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. And the reality is that's so wrong when you think from this perspective, because if we're all going to eat, drink, and toil, we're all going to eat, drink, and do things. No matter where you stand in the reality of whether you believe in the resurrection or whether you believe in God or anything, everyone's doing these things. But the one who knows that heaven is to come, the one who sees that, no matter how the toil, no matter how the eating and the drinking is incidental in the sense that you know that your greater reward is to come. You know that your greater reality, that ability to see God as He is in His true sense. And those that aren't see that end as a ticking time bomb, as an end that will come, and either if they believe in oblivion or if they believe in hell, or it really doesn't matter. They know hell is coming. So I think that's that vexation that's in you, because you feel like you're racing against time.
Yeah.
Instead of just considering when your time is going to go from all the toil to the pure joy of heaven.
Yeah.
And so if you're truly thinking about heaven, I think, and you reflect on it, you're all earthly good.
Yeah. Well, whenever anybody uses that phrase, I think, have this mind in you which was in Christ Jesus. I mean, I would agree with you. I don't think there's such a thing. But remember what Kidner said, too, about those people. A lot of times people that engage in that kind of eating and drinking and being merry, they're miserable, and they're doing it partly to escape reality. God has put eternity in everybody's heart, and that person knows they've got an innate sense. You know, Augustine talked about the vacuum that only God can fill. There's a vacuum there. And the problem with that person is that they'd rather, this is what we talked about at the very beginning, they're kind of sticking their head in the sand. In other words, what they're doing basically is saying, you know, I don't want to deal with that question. I don't want to deal with that vacuum. I don't want to have to deal with all this religious stuff. So basically, I'm going to try to escape that reality, and I'm going to escape that reality by eating and drinking and being merry. So they're eating and drinking and being merry, but for the totally wrong reason. They're miserable in the process. Yeah. Yeah, certainly.
Okay, in chapter 6, verse 2, the part of the phrase that says, God does not give him power to enjoy them. So that's referring to people who choose not to acknowledge that God is where all their gifts come from.
Why did he just leave?
He saw that coming.
I see Kevin Ivey back there, though. Chapter 6, verse 2. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them. I'm going to tell you, I don't know everything that means, but I think there are certain circumstances in some people's lives that they just don't have the means to enjoy certain things. So what did you ask? Is it somebody who chooses not to?
Yeah, I'm
Or-
just trying to figure out, what does that mean? Does that mean some people don't have the option of enjoying it because God didn't give them the power to, or?
Well, here's what I'm going to do. I want to tell you what Derek Kidner says. He's got a whole section in here when it comes to that, and he's got a list of things. Like he talks about financial things, for example. Maybe there's some sort of financial crash or something like that. You can think of somebody who has some sort of disease or something like that, that maybe not be able to enjoy things. I don't know everything that phrase means. And I guess for me, I took a little bit of comfort when Dr. Hamilton was here, and he listed 2 phrases, and he said, I don't know what those mean. So I don't know exactly what that means. I've thought a lot about that too. But I can tell you that Kidner says there are just some circumstances in people's lives where they can't enjoy certain things. Maybe in their hearts. Jeremy?
I think if I could take a stab at it.
Yeah, sure.
This is the opinion of Jeremy. If you take the baseline that all of us are sinners, we don't have the ability to enjoy these things that are from God. Okay, that's the baseline. It's not as if we have the ability of our own, when we're born, to enjoy the things of God. He grants us those things. And so that's not granted to everybody, just like faith is not granted to everybody. Possibly.
If you read the end of the verse there, I think it gives a hint. He says, God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. It almost gives the indication that God gave all these gifts and then for whatever reason took them away. Some other stranger, either through death or a thief or circumstances or war or fill in the blank. He had all this, but now a stranger is enjoying them. It's like they got taken away, which is almost worse than never happened, if not worse.
Yeah. Fred?
It reminds me of the New Testament where Jesus dealt with the farmer who was a fool. And he built all these things and he thought he was going to have a great enjoyment of it. Say, but thy soul shall die tonight. And I think someone that said, who's going to enjoy it? You're not going to enjoy it, basically. Someone else will enjoy it. So he was full of himself, thought he had done everything, and it was all about him. So he could not enjoy it.
That's my question is that saying that he's not going to be able to enjoy it because he won't submit to the Lord? Or are there some people who cannot, don't have that option?
Well, I think that's what Jeremy said. I think, maybe there's a little bit of a different take on it over here. I'm not sure exactly whether it's an issue of the heart where the person just doesn't submit, whether the person is not able because of the condition of their heart to submit, that God has not put it in their heart to submit, or whether it is that it's just, as Kevin said, it's just been taken from them for whatever reason. I don't know.
And I don't want to be, but you have a situation where you look at the talents that were given, and then when they were squandered or not multiplied, they were taken away. So God took them away and gave them to another. But I think that also in a Christian's life, we have these blessings. I am a very vexed person. I struggle with vexation. I struggle with the things that I strive to do well, and then all the things that get in my way, and myself mainly. And I find myself in this situation to where it's my lack of abiding in God that takes that ability away from me. And so in my sense, God has given me all good things, and He's given me the ability to obtain and hold and enjoy all good things. But my own choosing not to abide in Him, I don't get to enjoy them. So I think in both, He could take them away, and I think, but in a Christian's life, I think I mentioned that we have as much of God as we want. That's a phrase Kozer used. Mm-hmm. If you're a Christian, you have all of God. But if you choose not to seek after Him and chase after Him and constantly, abide in Him, you forfeit that joy. Mm-hmm. And so I do think it could be both, that he can take it away, but I think you can also not you know, you can lose out yourself because you made some choices.
Yeah, and I don't mean to dismiss that question at all, so don't take this the wrong way. But I think one way to look at it is to say, for me personally, He has given me the power to enjoy certain things. And so I think for me, my job is for the things that He has given me power to enjoy, that's where my focus needs to be. I need to enjoy those things. That's where my focus needs to be.
In our culture, all the addictions and suicides and drugs, and I just, like, that is their escape from reality. They're hopeless. And it just fits into Ecclesiastes that they're chasing the wind and trying to find the answers, and they're hopeless. And I mean, every day we hear of, tragedies, and I just read that, and it's so real.
I know exactly what you're saying. It's almost like, even though this is an old book, it jumps off the page as soon as you see the news. You see these people, and we're around these people. I think it's members of my own, not immediate family, but a couple of nieces I have, and it's just it's driving after the wind. It's vanity. It's escaping reality. Instead of going after God. And I fear for some of those people that they are the people that Paul is talking about in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, when Paul says, what good is it, if I slay beasts into Ephesus? If the resurrection didn't happen, then I might as well eat, drink, and be merry. And I fear for, like some of my nieces and things like that the problem is, to them, the resurrection is not real. And because the resurrection is not real, this is where they go. This is exactly what they do. They're doing exactly what, yeah.
But they're never satisfied.
They're never satisfied. No. No. Well, we could go on and on and on, but, I feel like Tim will crack the whip on me if we don't stop. So, Russ, can I get you to close us in prayer?
Lord God, we come in light of what we read tonight and looked at, Lord, we do pray, Lord, your blessings upon us to give us an awareness of your great and wonderful gifts, and to be able to see life as striving after the kingdom of God and the things of God, and in a way that we would be satisfied, that we would have eternal joy and blessing, Lord. Thank you so much for what you have given us, Lord. Forgive us where we have ignored or have turned our back upon the great things that you have given us. So small and yet so mighty. Lord, we thank you for all these good things. Lord, lead us into the rest of the night, into the rest of the week, to be mindful of your great and wonderful gifts. In Christ's name we pray.
Amen.